By the autumn of 1891, people along the stretch of railroad between Laramie and the little station of Red Creek had almost stopped being surprised by strangers. Hunters, traders, hired hands, ruined farmers, gold seekers, men from the South, men from the North, Mexicans, Irishmen, former soldiers, preachers, card sharps, runaway husbands, and sons who had no wish to return to their fathers' houses all passed through those parts. In some way, they all resembled one another. They traveled light, carried themselves warily, and spoke of the future as though it were bound to justify everything they had lost in the past. Yet when, at the end of September, a tall young man in a worn gray coat stepped down from a freight car in Red Creek, the station watchman kept watching him for a long while. There was nothing remarkable about the newcomer except the expression on his face. He did not look around with the usual curiosity of a man arriving somewhere new, nor did he seek out someone to question. He stood motionless, as though he already knew that no one was waiting for him there, and as though that was nothing new to him. His name was Levi Grant. He was in his 27th year. His dark hair was cropped short, like a soldier's, though he had never served. Shadows from the long road lay across his cheekbones, and by his mouth there ran that line one sees in men who are not merely stubborn, but used to bearing in silence what would seem unbearable to others. He carried a saddlebag, a rolled slicker, a rifle that was by no means new but had been well kept, and a letter he already knew almost by heart. The letter had arrived a month earlier from Wyoming, from a man he had not seen in 11 years. On the envelope was written, "To Eli Grant, if living," or to his son Levi. Eli, Levi's father, had by then been in the ground for half a year in the cemetery outside St. Joseph, and so the letter had come into the son's hands. It contained only a few lines, written in a firm, uneven hand. If you are Eli's boy and want to know the truth about what happened at Shadow Creek Pass in '81, come to Black Cedar Ranch before the first snows. If you are late, I will already be gone. There was no signature. Only a mark stood at the bottom, a black cross slashed through diagonally. Levi had hesitated for a long time before deciding to go. Truth, if he was honest, was not what he expected. People often promise the truth when they want to lure someone in, take revenge, or ease their own consciences. But there was one name in the letter that made him leave his work at the grain elevator, sell his old mare, borrow money from a neighbor, and head west. Shadow Creek, that was the place where his father had vanished along with 3 other men. At the time, people had said they had been caught in a blizzard, lost their way, and perished in the mountains. Later, another rumor spread, that it had been a robbery. Then a third, that it was tied to silver being hauled out of a mining camp in the south. Until the day she died, Levi's mother repeated that her husband had been neither thief nor robber, that he had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Levi had known since childhood that his father had left on that trip unwillingly, and that before leaving he had scarcely slept at all, pacing outside the house at night like a man whose own shadow was pulling him backward. And Levi remembered one more thing. 3 days before the disappearance, a stranger had come to their house, and when his mother saw him through the window, she turned so pale that she dropped the bowl of dough she was holding. The man stayed only a few minutes. He and Eli barely spoke. They only looked at one another. Then his father had told Levi to go outside. That memory had troubled him for years. Sometimes he thought that everything had been decided in that moment. From the station to Red Creek itself was hardly any distance at all. A few houses, a smithy, a general store, a hotel, a saloon, a stable, a little church, and a long shed used as a storehouse. Beyond the settlement the road led toward Brown Hills, behind which the first ridges of the mountains already began. The air there was drier than in Missouri, and it smelled not of river, mud, and hay, but of dust, resin, cold stone, and sun-scorched grass. From the west came a wind that was not yet winter wind, but already knew how to remind a man that snow was nearer than a warm noon might suggest. Levi entered the hotel, where the front room smelled of smoked meat, kerosene, and damp wool. Behind the desk stood a woman of about 40, lean, strong, with dark eyes and white threads in her hair. She raised her head, and in her gaze there was neither curiosity nor warmth, only the habitual weighing of a stranger. "Need a room?" she asked. "For one night, maybe 2. $1 for the bed, another 25 cents for supper. Got a horse?" "Not yet." "Then not everything is lost," she said as if it were a joke, though she did not smile. He paid and signed the register. The woman glanced briefly at the name. "Traveling far, Mr. Grant?" "To Black Cedar Ranch." Her hand, which held the key, paused for an instant. "Who sent you there?" "A letter." "From whom?" I don't know. She was silent for a moment. Then she laid the key on the counter and said, "Supper at 6, room upstairs, third on the left. If you mean to ride out there, don't delay. The weather in the mountains turns quickly now. You know that ranch?" "I know everything worth knowing about places within 20 miles of here," she answered. "That does not mean I enjoy speaking of it." Levi took the key and went upstairs. The room was narrow, with an iron bed, a wash basin, and a window looking out on the road. He set down his bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and for a while remained motionless, listening to footsteps below, the clatter of dishes, the distant whinny of a horse. Then he took out the letter and read it once more. The ink had faded a little, but the hand remained unmistakably a hand more accustomed to reins, shovel, or rifle than to a pen. Levi tried to imagine who might have summoned him after so many years. If it was a trap, it was a patient one. If it was repentance, it was strangely late. If it was a joke, it was too cruel to have been invented without reason. At 6 o'clock, there were only a few people in the dining room, 2 cattle buyers, a young cowhand with a bandaged hand, an elderly man in a black coat who looked either like a lawyer or a former schoolmaster, and a man Levi had noticed from the yard. He sat by the window with his back to the wall, like a cautious man, eating slowly and seldom raising his head. His face was long and dark from the sun, and an old scar cut across his left cheek. When he did finally glance up at Levi, his eyes proved gray and unpleasantly calm. Such eyes belonged to men who have seen violence too many times and no longer counted as anything exceptional. The landlady served stewed beans, cornbread, and coffee. Levi ate without appetite, but quickly, from long habit of the road. When he had nearly finished, the gride man rose, took his mug, and sat down opposite him without invitation. "You're Grant?" he asked. "Yes, Eli's son." Levi set down his spoon. "How do you know?" "Same way people here know more than they say. My name is Cole Mercer. I used to work at Black Cedar." The name meant nothing to Levi, but the tone did. The man sitting across from him was not seeking friendship. "And why sit down with me?" Levi asked. "To warn you. Don't ride out there at night. I wasn't planning to. Don't ride tomorrow either. If you don't know how to turn back in time, be clearer." Cole took a swallow of coffee. "This country is full of places where men lie, steal, and shoot one another. But Black Cedar is a place of a different kind. Too much filth has piled up there too long, and nobody ever cleaned it out. The owner is dying. His daughter is holding on by the last thread. The hands have scattered, and the men still nearby are waiting to see who dares take the largest bite once the old man finally drops." "You mean the owner of the ranch?" "I mean Silas Reed." Levi had never heard the name before, yet for some reason he felt something cold shift inside him. Cole went on, "If he wrote that letter, then he's decided to talk before he dies. Men like that don't summon witnesses without a reason. Either he wants to ease his soul, or he means to put you in front of a bullet. Why should you care?" "I don't," Cole said. "I just dislike seeing young fools killed ahead of schedule. It grows tedious." "You said he has a daughter." "He does. So what of it?" Cole gave a joyless half smile. "Nothing. Only don't think you're riding into a house where you'll be welcomed as a guest. The girl there didn't ask for you." He rose, nodded to the landlady, and left. Levi watched him go, irritated. Warnings of that kind tend to annoy more than help. Yet precisely because of that dry, nearly businesslike manner, he believed that Cole was not inventing danger for sport. Later, after he had gone back upstairs, Levi heard footsteps in the corridor. Someone knocked. On the threshold stood the landlady, lamp in hand. "Tomorrow, if you still mean to go, buy a horse from old Barker. His stable is next to the smithy. Don't take the grey gelding, he's lazy and afraid of bridges. Take the red mare. Do you help all your guests?" "Only those who don't strike me as men actively searching for their own graves," she answered. "Though in your case I may be mistaken." "You know Silas Red too. There was a time when the whole district knew him," she said. "Good night, Mr. Grant." The next morning the sky was clear, but there was white frost upon the grass. The red mare he bought from Barker was bony but tough. The old man named a fair price and, when he learned where the buyer meant to ride, spat to one side. The road follows the creek at first, then turns toward the pass. At the fork you'll see a dead cedar split by lightning. Take the left. If snow comes on before noon, don't delay turning back. The mountains here favor men who know when to yield. Levi rode out shortly after 8. The settlement quickly fell behind him. The road stretched through rolling country, where yellow grass rippled under the wind like hair on the back of some enormous beast. Farther on came pines, dark ravines, and scattered aspens already touched with autumn gold. The air was painfully clear. In the distance the ridges were blue, and snow lay on their tops, white and indifferent, as if another season had long since begun there. The higher the road climbed, the more plainly Levi felt that strange tension which sometimes grips a man not from immediate danger, but from drawing near to something long expected. He had fought before, lost money, seen death, spent nights under the open sky without food, trudged through spring mud for 2 days at a time. None of that mattered now. He was riding toward something that lay beneath his whole life like an unexploded charge. Until he dug it up, he would not know whether it was empty or real. By noon he reached the fork with the split cedar. The left-hand track was worse narrow. The pines closed in more thickly. Below, a narrow valley came into view, cut by a river. Beyond it, on a raised bench of land, stood a house, a barn, a stable, several sheds, and long corrals. That was Black Cedar Ranch. From a distance, it seemed not so much abandoned as guarded. No hands were in sight. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house in a thin line, and the corrals stood half empty. Only several horses grazed on the far slope, and 2 black bulls moved slowly near the fence. When Levi rode closer, a woman came out of the house. At first he thought her a girl, because of the lightness of her step. But when he saw her face, he understood she was around 30. She was tall and slender, dressed in a dark gown and a short woolen cape. Her hair was not black, but dark chestnut with a copper sheen, gathered at the back of her head without ornament. Her face was pale, though not sickly. There was in it such composure that one might think this woman had long since trained herself out of every useless weakness. Her eyes were grey-green, intent, and cool. One could tell at once that she was used to expecting no help. Levi removed his hat. "Miss Reed." "Yes," she said. "And you must be Mr. Grant, Levi Grant." "I know. Father has been expecting you." She said it without pleasure, not hostile, but as though the mere fact of his arrival promised her more trouble. "He wrote the letter?" Levi asked. "Yes, though by then the handwriting was barely his. In the last few weeks he has been stubborn more than alive." She glanced over his horse, his rifle, his bag. "You must be tired from the ride. You may tie the mare at the rail. If she's a good one, best unsaddle her yourself. We have few hands left now. I was told there are hardly any people left here." Her face did not change. "You were told correctly." He dismounted. While he unsaddled the mare, the woman stood nearby, but did not help and did not speak. Levi could feel her eyes on him and hurried in spite of himself, though he tried to appear calm. When he had finished, she said, "My name is Miriam Reed. There's a free room in the house. Are you staying long, or only until you've spoken with Father?" "That depends on what he says." "Then you'll need patience. Today is a bad day for him. Didn't he summon me himself?" "He did." "That does not mean he knows how to be convenient even when he is dying." For the first time something like weary anger sounded in her voice. Levi followed her into the house. Inside it was cool, clean, and too quiet. In the entry hung rifles, saddles, old coats. On the wall above the stairs was a darkened portrait of a young woman in a dark dress. Her face resembled Miriam's, only softer, fuller, and with a trusting expression in the eyes that the daughter no longer possessed. "My mother," Miriam said briefly. Noticing his glance, they went down the corridor. The boards creaked only faintly. At the far end of the house came a cough-deep tearing, as though nothing remained whole inside the man except stubbornness. Miriam stopped at a door. "He asked to have you brought in at once if you arrived. But I warn you, my father breathes with difficulty now, and tires quickly. If he starts choking, be silent, even if it seems to you he is just about to say the most important thing. And if there is no other time, then that will be his will," she answered. "Go in." Levi entered. The room was dim behind drawn curtains. A bed stood by the window. On the small table near it were a bottle of laudanum, a glass of water, a candle, a clock, and a Bible with worn edges. The man on the bed did not look like an old man, but the frame of one. Silas Reed's face was sharp, almost skeletal. The skin stretched across his cheekbones like dried leather, white hair lying in wisps on the pillow. Yet his eyes were still alive, dark, heavy, with that remnant of authority which does not leave even the dying, if they have spent half a lifetime commanding. He stared at Levi for a long time without speaking. Then hoarsely he said, "You resemble your father less than I expected, and I don't resemble you at all." "Sir," Levi answered. Something like a smile flickered on the old man's lips. "So you have a tongue. Good. Come closer. I want to see your face before I begin saying what I have kept silent too long." Levi stepped nearer. His heart beat evenly, but inside him everything was taut as a wire. Silas caught his breath. "You came for the truth about Shadow Creek. Is that right?" "Yes." "Then listen, and don't interrupt until I finish the first part. If you do, I'll lose the thread, and I cannot afford to lose it. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. In the autumn of 81, I hired your father and 3 others to escort a wagon of silver from Warren Camp. Officially, the papers said the load was tools and flour. In truth, it was silver. It had to be moved past 2 bands that were working the district then, and another outfit pretending to be deputy sheriffs. Your father knew the job was dangerous, but he agreed. Not out of greed. He needed the money. That much I already knew, Levi said. Not all of it, Silas rasped. He agreed because he believed there was a traitor among my men, and he was clever, saw more than he said. Levi felt his fingers grow cold. So you knew something was coming. I suspected it, but I was too sure of myself. That is my guilt from the beginning. At Shadow Creek Pass, we were not met by bandits from outside, but by a man from within. He led the others to the spot where it was easiest to set an ambush. Shooting started. 2 men went down at once. The wagon overturned. The horses bolted. Your father wounded one of the attackers, then seized a sack of silver and shouted at me to get down the gulch. I did. He coughed so violently that blood appeared on his lips. Miriam, who had entered the room soundlessly, handed him water. For the first time, Levi saw how her face changed beside her father. It did not soften, but it became attentive to the point of pain, like the face of someone who has cared for the sick too long and no longer hopes, but simply does what must be done. Silas waved her away. Then, he whispered, then I hid among the rocks and heard 3 more shots. After that, silence. When it was dark, I went back. No one alive. Or at least that is what I decided. Decided? Levi asked sharply. The old man turned a heavy gaze on him. I found your father unconscious. He was breathing. He might have lived if I had taken him on my back and hauled him down, but you didn't. Miriam slowly raised her head. Levi noticed how white her fingers had gone on the back of the chair. No, Silas said. I did not. I was wounded in the side, barely able to keep to my feet, and I was thinking only that if I lingered, the men who set the ambush would finish me too. I took the papers, left the silver because it was too heavy, and went. At dawn I brought men back, but your father's body was gone. The room seemed to tighten. Levi heard nothing but his own breathing, and you kept silent for 11 years. Yes, why? Because after that, something else began. We found one of the dead men, one, not ours, and by a scar we learned who he had served. I understood then who had sold the route. It was Owen Brady, my foreman. He had fled, and Silas grimaced. I decided that if I told it all as it had happened, I would first be confessing to cowardice, and then I would be letting the enemy know the silver had not been found. Many still believe it went into the ravine with the dead men, but I saw where the sack fell. Since then this land has been picked at like carrion by crows. Brady wanted to come back. The only thing that stopped him was that I had stayed alive. And my father? Levi asked quietly. Do you think he died afterward, or that someone took him? Silas was silent a long while. I don't know. And that is the worst thing I will tell you. I do not know. Levi looked at him and felt a wave of fury pass through him, so cold it scarcely had heat at all. Too late, too dry, too little. He had expected a fact and received another abyss. So you called me only to ease your conscience? No, Silas said. I called you because Brady has come back. Miriam straightened sharply. Father, be quiet. He must know. The old man turned his eyes to Levi. In recent months, Brady's men have shown up in the district again, asking about the pass. The old marker's papers long gone. They think I kept the map, or perhaps more than the map. I sent for you because if they come for this matter, at least you will have a choice, walk away, or finish what I did not. Your father deserves that. Someone should go to the end. And why not you? Levi asked tightly. Silas closed his eyes. Because I am dying. It was said without self-pity and almost without bitterness, merely as a fact he could no longer dispute, even with himself. After the conversation, Levi went out into the yard. The wind had grown stronger. A light leaden veil had spread across the sky. A loose board clapped somewhere beyond the corral. He walked down to the river and stopped where the water rushed between stones. Cold, dark, swift. His head was both empty and full of noise. He did not know what he had expected, but not this. Not a confession with more shame than answer in it. Not to learn that his father may have been alive after the ambush. Not that everything was once again tangled around silver, a map, and a man whose face he had never seen. Owen Brady. He heard footsteps and turned. Miriam stood a few yards away. You are angry, she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. With your father? Yes, that is natural. And you? He asked. How long have you known? Not long, not all of it. I knew there was something in the past that kept him from sleeping every October. I knew the name Brady was not to be spoken in front of him, and I knew one man vanished at the pass, and that father never said which one. He told me the whole of it only a week ago, when he ordered me to send for you." She looked at him directly, without lowering her gaze. Levi suddenly understood what had struck him so strongly in her from the first moment, not beauty, though she was beautiful, but the way she held her own pain so tightly, as though she had trained herself not to let it out even in solitude. "You didn't ask me to come," he said. "No. And yet here I am." "Yes. You don't like it." Miriam lowered her eyes to the water. "I do not like it when the past comes back into the house. Each time, it takes something. But if father is right, and Brady truly is near, then I need a man who cares about Shadow Creek for reasons other than money. There are not many, and me." She smiled faintly, and there was no warmth in it. "I care about everything that might finish this house before I can either save it or bury it." That same evening, another man appeared at the ranch. He rode in shortly before dark, on a bay gelding, in a long coat, his hat pulled low over his eyes. When he dismounted by the house, Levi recognized him at once. Cole Mercer. Miriam met him on the porch without surprise. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said. "So did I," Cole answered. "But on the North Road I saw two men asking too many questions about your father. One of them wore a bracelet with a brass clasp. Brady's men used to wear those." Miriam gave a short nod. "Come in." She noticed Levi and added, "It seems you will have to become better acquainted, Mr. Grant." At supper the three of them sat in the dining room, where the lamp cast an unsteady light over the white tablecloth, too plain for luxury and too neat for a house holding itself together by effort alone. Cole ate little. In the half-light the scar on his cheek looked deeper. "How many men does Brady have?" Levi asked. "No one knows exactly," said Cole. 5 or 6 regulars. "But he knows how to hire whoever is willing to risk something for a share." "Is he rich?" "Not rich enough to be an honest man, and not poor enough to fear the law," Cole said. "Did you ever ride for him?" "No. I rode for your present host. And I left for reasons other than wages." Miriam set down her cup slowly. "Cole, what?" He raised his eyes to hers. "The boy ought to know that no one here is a saint." "I am not asking for saints," Levi said. "Living men would be enough." For the first time Cole's smile was a little more distinct. "That is more sensible." Later, when Cole had been given a room in the annex and Miriam had gone to her father, Levi stepped out into the yard. The night was clear, dark, cold. A thin moon hung above the pines. He stood by the fence when he heard Cole's voice from the shadow. "Can't sleep." "No, neither can I." Cole came closer, though he remained a little off to the side. "You want to ask why I left the ranch?" he said. "Yes, because 6 years ago Silas Reed ordered me to do something vile, and I refused." "What?" "Throw a widow off her land. In winter with a child." Legally the land already belonged to Reed, on paper, but the law seldom knows how to look at snow and an empty shed. I told him I would not do it. He said I would, unless I wished to be without work. I left the work, and the widow. By spring she was gone to relatives. Levi was silent a moment. Then why come back to help his daughter? Cole looked at the house. There was light in one window, because she is not him. The answer was simple, and for that very reason it sounded true. The next day the first snow came. Not the real winter cover, but a nervous white grain that the wind tore from the sky and drove away again across the ground. Silas woke weak, but with his mind clear. He ordered that an old iron box be brought. Inside lay yellowed papers, a broken silver compass, several faded letters, and a sheet on which a rough plan of the Shadow Creek ravine had been penciled. On the reverse side someone had long ago written figures and brief notes. Silas pointed with a bony finger to a narrow bend of the stream. Here the wagon overturned, and here the finger moved to a cross beneath the cliff. I saw the sack of silver for the last time. But that is not the main thing. The main thing is that under that ledge begins an old miner's path known to very few. If Brady means to get there before the snows close in, he will use it. You want us to ride to the pass? Miriam asked. Yes. In your condition you cannot even stand, and yet you give orders as if you still commanded 20 men, and you still argue as though you were 15, he rasped. She straightened, and for an instant there flashed between them such an old, familiar tension that Levi understood. These two had loved one another neither softly nor simply. Their bond consisted of duty, stubbornness, pain, and that kind of loyalty which often looks much like anger. By noon it had been decided they would ride out in a party of 3, Levi, Cole, and Miriam. Levi objected to the woman going, but Miriam cut him off calmly. "I have ridden this land since I was 10. I know 3 roads to the pass and 2 false trails. I shoot straight and have a poor temper. You may spare me unnecessary gallantry. Cole only grunted. They set out before dawn. The snow had stopped in the night, but the air had grown still colder. The horses picked their way carefully over the frozen ground. Levi rode beside Miriam and from time to time caught her profile against the pale sky. She spoke little, only now and then pointing where the trail dipped beneath the slope, where it was better to skirt the scree, where the horses might be watered. Cole rode a little ahead, as though by old habit, assuming the role of scout. By noon they reached a narrow valley where the rocks closed in more tightly and the stream, edged with ice, ran deeper and angrier. Everything there seemed washed out of the world. Black stone, white snow, dark firs, grey sky. Levi had imagined the place dozens of times from other men's stories, but in reality Shadow Creek Pass was far harsher. A man could vanish there not only physically, memory itself quickly became part of the cold landscape. They dismounted and went on foot along the ledge. Cole found tracks. 3 horses, quite fresh. They were here yesterday, he said. Maybe they're still close. Or already back with something useful, Miriam said. Under the cliff, where the map showed an old broken shelf of rock, they found not silver but emptiness. Someone had recently been shifting stones there. Fresh fragments lay in the snow. Levi dropped to one knee and noticed a scrap of cloth wedged in a crack between slabs, rotten with age but still dark blue. He carefully pulled it free. It was a torn piece of a jacket. My father had a blue work coat, he said quietly. No one answered. Cole, meanwhile, examined a neighboring outcrop and suddenly called to them. In the back of a crevice they found a narrow opening. Behind it began a natural hollow, almost a cave. In one corner lay a rusted kettle, a fragment of belt, several human bones, and a half-decayed boot. Levi did not at once understand that he was looking at the remains of a man who may have lived long after being left to die. Beside the bones were a rusted buckle and a knife in leather sheath, almost fallen apart. Miriam stood motionless. Cole said softly, "Someone sheltered here." For a while, Levi crouched, feeling no cold at all. On the inner side of the buckle were stamped the letters E.G. He did not weep, not because he was too hard, but because in such moments tears often fail to catch up with a man. He touched the buckle with 2 fingers, as though afraid to destroy even that, and only then let out a breath. So he got this far, he said. So he was alive. On the stone beside the remains, words had been scratched with a knife. Time and damp had erased part of them, but one could still make out if they find this. After that the line ran unevenly, as though the hand no longer held the blade steady. Beneath it, in another line, Silas left. Don't know if he saw I was alive. Levi felt something heavy shift in his chest. His father had not only made it to the cave, he had thought that perhaps he had been seen alive and left all the same. But Miriam said slowly, "I am sorry," and it did not sound like empty politeness. Levi raised his eyes to hers, and for the first time saw in them not cool reserve, but true human compassion, not soft, not sentimental, but deep and dangerous. Because such compassion cannot be feigned, only shared. They had barely carried the bones out and covered them with a cloak when Cole raised his hand, quiet from above. On the side of the pines came a sound, the dry snap of a branch under a hoof. Then another, then a man's voice, muffled by the wind. "We're not alone," Cole said. Coming from below and above, clever. The shot came almost at once. The bullet struck stone near Levi's shoulder and sent sparks flying. They threw themselves behind the ledge. 2 more shots rang out. Miriam, wasting no time, drew her carbine and took position behind a boulder. Levi snatched up his rifle. "How many?" he asked. "At least 3, Cole answered. "Maybe 4. They want the silver. Now they want us as well," Cole said grimly. The shooting continued in short bursts. One of the attackers shouted, "Surrender. You've nowhere to go." Cole leaned out and fired. From above came a curse and the heavy sound of a fall. "One less," he said, but their position remained bad. They were pinned to the rocks, and the path down to the horses lay under fire. Levi noticed that Miriam was paler than usual, but her hands were steady. She aimed calmly, like someone who had long ago learned the cost of trembling. "I'll draw them from the left," said Cole. "You 2 cut down to the horses by the stream." "No," Miriam said sharply. "That's suicide. Not the first time." He looked at her, and in that brief glance Levi understood much at once. Cole had not returned only out of duty to the ranch, and Miriam knew it. Perhaps she had known for a long time, perhaps far too long to pretend now that there was nothing between them. "Cole," she said quietly, but he was already moving. He went left, slipping between rocks, and almost at once 2 shots rang out in quick succession from that direction. Levi and Miriam, crouching low, ran for the stream. Ice cracked underfoot. Bullets struck the water, throwing up spray. Levi fired upward without aiming, only to force the enemy to duck. Almost at the same instant, Miriam sent a bullet toward a place where a hat had flashed. The man above cried out and tumbled down the slope, sending snow and stones skidding. They reached the horses. Cole appeared a minute later, breathing hard and clutching his side. A dark stain spread across his coat. "How many?" Levi asked. "One got away. 2 are down. Another may be wounded. You need that side bandaged." On the move, they did not linger. The bones of Levi Grant, wrapped in the cloak Levi tied to his saddle. It was almost unbearable to ride with his father that way after so many years of not knowing. Like carrying something wrested back from stone and greed. But there was something right in it too. For the first time, the road had given him not a question, but a purpose. When they returned to the ranch that evening, Silas was still alive. His face had turned gray, his breathing heavier with each hour. Yet when he saw the bundle at Levi's saddle, he understood without a word. "You found him," he whispered. "Yes," Levi said. And writing on the stone, Silas closed his eyes. Tears came from beneath the lid's knot, only 2 uneven tracks on his hollow cheeks. Levi had not thought he would feel pity for him, but in that moment he felt not forgiveness, no, but only a weary recognition. The old man had carried his shame all these years, neither out of nobility nor strength, but because some punishments require no court. That night Silas sent for Levi alone. Behind the portrait in the study, he rasped, "There's a hiding place. In it are the land papers and a letter for the sheriff. If anything happens to me before morning, you'll deliver it." "Anything happens," Levi repeated dully. "You still speak as if you have a choice." The old man gave a weak, ghost-like smile. "Your angry good means you won't soften too soon. Listen, Brady won't stop. He thinks the papers hold the exact mark of the silver. In truth, they hold only proof of his part in the ambush. I kept that for the day I could drag him down with me. But I waited too long. Don't repeat my mistake. You want me to kill him. I want you to finish it, however it can be finished." He paused, then added almost inaudibly, "I saw your father breathing." Levi clenched his teeth. "Then why did you leave?" Silas stared at the ceiling. "Because I was afraid, and because in that moment I told myself that if I saved myself, I would return with men in time. A man always knows how to call cowardice reason until it is too late. That is the whole answer. He died before dawn." Miriam sat beside him, holding his hand. When it was over, she did not cry. She only bowed her head and remained that way for a few seconds, as though listening to the sudden, almost impossible silence. Then she rose and said, "We must close his eyes." They buried him 2 days later. Few came. The hotel keeper from Red Creek, old Barker, the pastor, to neighboring ranchers, Cole, and 3 men who had once worked for Silas and ridden from a distance. They stood beneath a low sky in damp wind among brown grass and the first drifts of snow. The ground was frozen hard. The shovels bit into it with difficulty. Silas Reed was buried beside his wife. Levi Grant was buried a little below, at the edge of the family plot, because Levi said his father had died there and ought to remain there. He did not fully understand his own decision. Perhaps, after so many years of emptiness, he could not bear to carry him away once again in a stranger's box across half the country. A grave beneath the pines, above water and stone, seemed the only honest place. After the burial, the snow came in earnest. Overnight the ranch seemed smaller and quieter. The world narrowed to the house, the stable, the sheds, and the road, which the wind drifted shut more and more heavily. It was no longer possible to leave at once, nor did Levi mean to. Brady was somewhere close. The papers from the hiding place confirmed as much. Among them was an old letter signed by a county judge mentioning Owen Brady as an intermediary in the silver transport, and another page with the statement of a man named Harper Colfax, the same man Eli had wounded at the pass. Shortly before his death, Colfax had admitted that the ambush had been arranged in collusion with Brady, and that Silas, having survived, chose silence in order to save his name and his land. That will be enough for court. "If Brady is taken alive," said Cole, looking over the papers, "and if not," Levi asked, "then paper will be worth less than a bullet." Cole answered dryly. They decided to wait. The waiting was worse than the journey itself. By day they worked breaking ice, carrying water, mending sheds, feeding stock. Miriam managed everything without unnecessary words. She seemed, if anything, even quieter after her father's death, but stronger too. The house now bore the stamp of her sole presence, order, directness, the absence of any pity for herself. In the evenings they sat by the fire. Cole would sometimes go out to check the surrounding ground. Levi found himself more and more often alone with Miriam. At first their conversations were dry about work, weather, cartridges, papers, but little by little something else arose between them, cautious knowledge of another person. Without cheap confidences, without fine phrases, he learned that she had scarcely left the valley in the past 10 years, because first her mother had been ill, then her father had begun to fail, and after that the ranch had sunk into debt and trouble. He learned that at 16 she had wanted to study in Denver, but had come back after 2 months when her mother took to bed. He learned that she did not forgive quickly, but knew how to remember justice. She learned, in turn, that Levi had worked in a mill as a boy, that his mother had died quietly, almost without complaint, and that he had always borne lies worse than poverty. One evening, while the wind struck the shutters and long shadows of the fire moved through the house, Miriam said, "Do you still hate my father?" Levi was silent for a long time. "I don't know. Hatred is a hot thing. What remains after all this is colder than that. But I do not excuse him. I am not asking you to." She sat in an armchair by the hearth, her hands resting on the arms. Her face was calm, but her gaze tense. "Sometimes," she said, "it seems to me that I spent my whole life beside a man I was meant to love and fear at the same time. It is a bad combination. It bends everything." "Did you love him?" "Yes," she answered at once. "And I was angry with him, and sorry for him, and contemptuous of him, all at once. I do not think dutiful daughters speak so of dead fathers, but I never managed to become dutiful. You managed to become honest." She raised her eyes to him. For a while they looked at one another, and Levi suddenly felt how dangerous the silence was. Not because there was passion in it, but because there was trust, coming too quickly in the wake of common grief. He turned toward the fire. "When all this is over, what will you do?" he asked. "If it is ever over, I will try to keep the ranch, sell part of the stock, dismiss extra hands if any can still be found, perhaps mortgage the south tract and pay the bank, and if you can't keep it, then I will lose honestly." He wanted to tell her she should not remain there alone, but words like that, too early and too easily spoken, can sound like promises a man has no right to make amid winter blood and unfinished vengeance. So he remained silent. 3 days later, Brady came himself. Or rather, he sent a man ahead with a white cloth tied to his rifle. The messenger was a lank fellow in a grey coat, with red whiskers and a face on which nothing human had lingered except cunning. "Mr. Brady offers to talk," he said, standing by the gate, "without shooting. He knows you have papers. You know he has men. Why spill blood over old dirt? Let him come alone, without his rats," Cole answered. "He'll be at the old bridge over the North Fork tomorrow at noon. He wants to see Miss Reed and Mr. Grant. The rest may come if they wish." The messenger rode off. "It's a trap," Levi said. "Of course it is," Cole replied, "but there won't be another chance." Miriam stood by the window. "He wants to see what we truly hold," she said. "And whether we'll flinch." "You are not going," Levi said. She turned to him. "Do not order me. It's not an order. It's common sense." "No, Mr. Grant. It is a male habit of calling concern what is, in truth, the wish to decide for someone else." He was about to object, but Cole said quietly, "She is right. Besides, Brady may show his face only to her. With me, he settles old scores. With you, new ones. But Miss Reed is the landowner to him. That is different." The next day they rode out in a party of 3. The North Fork was not a wide river, and a wooden bridge had once been thrown across it. Now it was half rotten and seemed to stand only by force of the winter frost. Bare willows grew around it, and black ice showed beneath the bank. The sky was leaden. Everything looked as if the world had deliberately chosen its most joyless day for the meeting with the past. Brady waited in the middle of the bridge. He proved to be a man of middle height, well-built, in an expensive dark coat and spotless gloves. The hair at his temples had gone grey, but his face remained smooth, almost handsome, if not for the mouth too thin and hard. He smiled when he saw them, and it was that smile that made him truly unpleasant. It revealed nothing, it merely concealed the teeth. "Miss Reed," he said, touching his hat slightly, "you resemble your mother more than I expected, and you are worse than I was told." Miriam answered. He laughed softly. "That is your father in you. Pity he did not live to our meeting." "Not a pity," said Levi. "Say what you came to say." Brady turned his eyes on him. "So this is Eli's son." "Yes, I see it now. His eyes. You killed my father." "No," Brady said calmly. "I wanted to, but not by my own hand. Though in younger days I might have claimed that credit to then who? A man named Colfax thought he finished him, but old Eli proved tougher. I learned later he lived several more days." "A pity," in a way. He was the only one of your lot who truly understood. Levi took a step forward. Cole shifted his hand slightly nearer his holster. Careful, Brady said. My men are on the slope. I assume yours are hidden somewhere too. Let us not spoil the meeting with haste. I came with an offer. You give me the papers. I tell you the exact place where the silver lies, if it still lies there, and we part. And then you ride away peacefully, Miriam said. Very convenient. More convenient for all than another evening of corpses, he replied. The papers go to the sheriff, Levi said. The sheriff? Brady smiled almost pityingly. Young man, do you seriously think sheriffs on this territory grow strong from paper? Their strength is measured by who pays for their horses. Then why do you want the papers? Miriam asked. He turned his head toward her, and in that moment Levi understood. Brady was more dangerous not as a gunman, but as a man who had long been accustomed to winning with words wherever bullets could still be postponed. Because old testimonies can irritate new partners, he said. I have no wish for noise. You have no wish for war. This could be settled more simply. Too late, Miriam said. So you think? Brady lifted his hand slightly. A movement flickered on the slope. It was precisely what they had expected. Cole fired first not at Brady, but at a man in the brush to the right. Shooting broke out at once. Horses lunged. Miriam threw herself behind the bridge support. Levi drew his revolver and fired into the boards near Brady's feet, trying to force him back. Brady leapt aside with astonishing coolness. The whole world shrank to the crack of gunfire, wet timber, shouted curses, and grey air. Levi saw Brady twice, only in flashes, between the beams. Then the man ran for the bank. Levi went after him. Snow and ice hampered his feet. They slid down the embankment almost together. Brady wheeled and fired. The bullet passed by Levi's ear. He returned the shot. Brady stumbled, but did not fall. Then they came together at close quarters, too near to aim. A short, furious struggle began on the frozen ground. Levi felt a blow in his ribs, smelled powder and wet leather, heard his own breathing. Heavy and animal, Brady was strong and fought without panic, like an experienced man. But Levi was younger, and in that moment he bore not only the weight of the present, but of all he had learned in the last weeks. When Brady reached for his knife, Levi caught his wrist in time and struck him across the temple with the butt of the revolver. He reeled another blow, and he dropped to his knees. Levi leveled the revolver at his face. It's finished, he said. Brady raised his eyes. In them there was neither remorse nor plea, only rage and disbelief that someone like this boy had proved faster. You won't shoot, he whispered. To honest, Levi himself did not know whether it was true. Perhaps a week earlier he would not have, but now he thought of the cave under the cliff, of the words scratched in stone, of his mother waiting all those years for a man who was already gone, of Miriam forced to rebuild life board by board after her father's death, and of the fact that some men use other people's honesty as a tool far longer than they ought to be allowed. The shot sounded dull. Brady pitched backward and did not move again. The shooting at the bridge died away a few minutes later. Two of Brady's men lay dead. One had vanished into the brush wounded. Cole had only a graze across the shoulder. Miriam had a torn sleeve and a scrape on her forehead. When Levi climbed back up to the bridge, she looked at him long and intently, as though making certain the same man had returned. Is it over? She asked. It's over. The wind strengthened. Fine snow began to fall from the leaden sky. They quickly searched Brady's body and found in his pockets a notebook filled with names, debts, and marks against men who clearly had no wish for it to reach a sheriff's hands. That proved no less valuable than the old papers. 2 days later, the county sheriff arrived in Red Creek with deputies. Brady was too well known for his death simply to be forgotten, and too inconvenient for anyone to begin a real war over him. The papers, the notebook, Cole's testimony, and Miriam's own statement did their work. What passed for law finally began to move in the proper direction, not quickly, not nobly, but enough that the remnants of Brady's outfit dissolved across the district, and the Reed house ceased to be bait for old vultures. December proved hard, snowy, and windy. Levi remained at the ranch, at first because it would have been foolish to leave in winter, then because there was work to do, then because he could no longer imagine simply riding away before spring. With Cole, a tacit companionship formed. They spoke little of feeling, but understood one another well in labor and in danger. Sometimes Levi thought Cole would still leave come spring, as men like him often do, not being made to put down roots. But watching the way Cole looked at Miriam, he understood that things might not be so simple. Yet life is seldom obliging enough to grant each person a clear future. At the end of January, Cole made ready to go. Where? Levi asked, seeing his saddlebag by the door. to Cheyenne. I'll give my statement in person. Sign the papers. If I don't do it myself, someone later will lose a line or two and the whole thing may come to nothing. Miriam stood by the window, her back to them. For long? She asked without turning. 2 weeks, maybe 3, I see. Cole looked at her. This is not running away, Miriam. She turned, not a muscle shifted in her face. I didn't say you were running, but you thought it. I am too busy to spend time considering your habits. He smiled sadly. That is why I... He did not finish. He picked up his bag and went out. Miriam remained at the window, and Levi saw how tightly her hands were clenched. You love him, he said quietly. She did not answer at once. It is an inconvenient feeling for a woman who must count sheep, accounts and firewood for February. But still, yes, she said. Apparently I do. Spring came late. The snow melted slowly, yielding to grey mud, glittering runoffs, and a wind that smelled of thawed earth. One morning, when the sun for the first time truly warmed the south slope, Levi went to his father's grave. The ground around it had settled. The pines sounded softer than in winter. He stood there a long time without words. It seemed to him that inside, at last, another kind of silence had arrived, not the empty kind, but the kind that comes when a circle has been closed. He had not gotten his father back. He had not gotten a simple truth. He had not received a child's comfort that the guilty would repent and the dead sleep peacefully by grace of the law. But he had gone to the end of the road that had once been cut off beyond his will, and that was enough to live on, not beside a question, but above it. When he came back to the house, Miriam was standing at the hitching rail. Wind had brought color into her cheeks, and her eyes were a little lighter than they had been since winter ended. A letter for you, she said. It was from Cole. Short. He wrote that the business was concluded, the statements accepted, one of Brady's men arrested in Laramie, and that he himself would return if there was work for him at the ranch. And if the owner had not changed her mind about considering him a drifter with a bad temper. Levi raised his eyes. Miriam was looking at him with a faint but unmistakably real smile. It seems there will be work, he said. It seems there will, she answered. They walked toward the house together. The day was bright and high. Horses stirred in the corrals. Somewhere in the far pasture a crane cried, and thaw water ran so clearly that it seemed to wash away not only the snow, but all the stagnant darkness of the winter months. On the porch, Miriam stopped. And you, Levi? She asked. What will you do now? He looked at the valley, the house, the mountains, no longer as hostile as they had been in autumn. Then at her. I don't know, he said honestly. For the first time in many years, I don't know. And perhaps that is not the worst beginning. She nodded, as though accepting precisely that answer. You will stay at least until haying. At least. Her gaze rested on him longer than courtesy required. The wind stirred a strand of hair at her temple. Levi suddenly understood that their whole long, difficult road to that moment had not been about love flaring up beautifully in the midst of disaster. No, it had been otherwise, and for that very reason truer. What had grown between them was that rare feeling which begins as support, becomes trust, and then turns into the need to see the other beside you not from weakness, but because with that person the world regains its proper size. He touched her hand, not impulsively, not demanding, but as though asking permission to enter that part of her life where she had grown used to standing alone. Miriam did not pull her fingers away. Her hand was cool, strong, and alive. Until haying, she repeated, and then we shall see. And in those words there was no promise one could icily break, but there was truth, the rarest kind of all. Not about the past, not about guilt, not about the dead, but about the fact that to people who had survived winter and other people's secrets, might still allow themselves to think about the future without fear, as though it were no longer their enemy, but simply a road still waiting to be traveled.